Hi, I'm Vadd, and this is a silly video. The CEO of Xbox played a version of The Elder Scrolls 6, said it was incredible, and we're here to decide how much that actually means. No, we're not doing a forensic investigation here. This is more of a throw this one on while you're driving home from work, doing dishes, or pretending to clean the house kind of video, because I do think there's something interesting underneath the obvious corporate hype. She has every reason to say the game looks amazing, but she also probably knows more about the Elder Scrolls 6, the way it actually looks right now, than almost anyone else outside of Bethesda. So in this video, a couple simple things are going on. We're going to go over the post, talk about the reasons maybe we should believe her, maybe we shouldn't believe her, and figure out how much weight any of this deserves. If you're not familiar, Asha Sharma is the current Chief Executive Officer of Xbox and an Executive Vice President at Microsoft. She took over Microsoft Gaming this year in February. This is the year of 2026, so February 2026. It's my understanding she previously was leading an artificial intelligence product at Microsoft as the chief operating officer for, I think it was Instacart, and she held a senior products role with the Meta Corporation, so the Facebook group, right? Unlike many other Xbox leaders before her, her background was primarily in technology, platforms, and business rather than game development. All that being said, word for word, the post reads like this. This was posted to her official X account. It says live playthrough of the Elder Scrolls 6. Then we get a semicolon and a bunch of little asterisks that nobody cares about. So live playthrough of the Elder Scrolls 6, asterisks, this morning. The scale and grandeur are incredible. The story is even greater. This post alone is currently closing in on 10 million views on just that platform. But if you're watching it here or anywhere else, then, you know, a lot more people have seen it. I think it's sitting at like 7.5 when I grabbed the screenshot. A lot of people have seen this. I think a lot of people are talking about it for good reasons. Now, I think the big question here is kind of two parts, right? Which is one, should we believe she actually saw a substantial build of the Elder Scrolls 6? And I think there's a second part to that, which is, do we believe her conclusion is that, you know, she says it's incredible. Do we believe that, right? I think those are two different questions that are both kind of opened up here. Let's be clear here. I think there's very little reason to doubt that she actually saw it. Bethesda said in July of this year, so just a couple of months ago, that it is actively playing the Elder Scrolls 6 daily. So I don't think a playable internal demonstration is a surprise at all. I think this makes absolute complete sense. Yes, I do believe that she actually saw a playable internal version of the Elder Scrolls 6. The finished product, no, but I do think she was there. Especially because, let's be clear here, this isn't the first time an executive has showed up to Bethesda to view the Elder Scrolls 6. As Matt Booty previously said, he visited Bethesda, sat down with Todd Howard previously, and saw the Elder Scrolls 6 running. These are other executives who work at or have worked at the company who have come down and said, hey, let's see what Bethesda's doing. So we have a track record of Microsoft or Xbox gaming executives showing up at Bethesda to see a demonstration. So this isn't unusual. I think something else to note here is that the Elder Scrolls 6 was announced in 2018. We're coming up on, 10 years at the time of this video? So for Bethesda to be like, hey, we have a playable version we're working on internally every day, well, it's been almost 10 years. I hope you have something that you're working on that you can play test on, that you have something to show of your efforts. I fully believe that you're working on this game. And of course, it makes sense after 8 years, you can show someone something. Another level to the credibility here, I think, is that Asha here has direct access. This is not some anonymous leaker who randomly showed up in somebody's email box. This is the literal chief executive officer of the Xbox gaming faction here in the Microsoft, executive vice president. This is someone with the authority and the right role to be making this announcement. It's not an anonymous leak, it's an announcement. If anyone outside the Bethesda development team gets to see this game early, she's got to be at the top of the list, right? Let's talk about the downside of just lying, right? Why would she lie? I think if she publicly invented this demonstration, it's just like a bizarre risk. Hundreds of Bethesda and Xbox employees would know whether this event actually occurred. I think the sensible assumption here is that Asha actually did hands-on have some kind of a playthrough and event happen, just like she described. And let's try and be a little bit more fair than the average bear here. She may genuinely have been impressed, even if we're not. Maybe you and I look at this and we're like, mid, whatever. But that's not her position, her opinion. I don't think that corporate bias default means dishonest. I think Bethesda would have shown her the strongest material they have in the game. And I think there's absolute reason to believe that after 8 years, she sees this, the best of what they've got to offer, and she walks away legitimately thinking it looked fantastic. We have no reason to call her a liar right now. she may have genuinely been impressed. I think something else that gets forgotten in this discussion might be that Bethesda said they built the Creation Engine 3 to generate the next generation of RPGs. And The Elder Scrolls 6 is running, to the best of my knowledge, on the Creation Engine 3 with all the new tools, system, and rendering that offers. I want to be optimistic here and believe that this gives substance to the claims that they are really pursuing something greater in scale than simply making a copy and paste Skyrim again. I think the wording here is very careful because there's nothing easily falsified in the promise. Because she didn't sit here and go, there's no load screens. That was not said. She didn't say it's a 200-hour campaign. That was not said. Hey, there's 60 FPS everywhere. Yeah, nobody said that. Or like a false promise. Releases next year. None of that. None of that. None of that was said. None of that. The wording here is very careful. She mostly describes her individual subjective reaction. So, full circle here. Reasons why we should believe her before we get into reasons why maybe we shouldn't. Bethesda's been at this for 8 years. They have something to show. They've publicly said they're internally playtesting stuff. Executives from outside of Bethesda, but in the greater company here, have come before to see these things. The wording was very careful. It wasn't necessarily broad, but it wasn't like a big promise of the campaign will be this long. None of that. It was broad language on a subjective reaction. And if we assume that Bethesda knows how to make video games and they have a track record of making good games, then maybe we should believe that she walked away genuinely impressed. I think these are 10 pretty good reasons to give or take, depending how you want to count on that, but just a number of reasons that maybe we should believe her, right? It is time to put on your skeptical hats, your suspicious goggles, your questionable outfits. Let's be a little more skeptical. You and I both know that a huge world isn't automatically a good world, because here's the facts. Saying scale and grandeur, it tells us nothing about quest density, NPC quality, exploration rewards, combat progression, technical performance, or whether any of that scale makes the game better. Let's also remember that there's no release date. We could still be another 8 years out. I don't mind waiting. Take as long as you need to make the best game you can possibly make. I'll wait. No complaints here. None. So there's no reason to believe that what was shown to the current CEO is the final product. The game can still change substantially. It's actually only in the very recent past that Bethesda has described The Elder Scrolls 6 as their primary development focus. A genuinely excellent build today isn't representative of the exact game the broader consumer market will receive. This also isn't the first time an executive officer has said something about The Elder Scrolls 6. Matt Booty is currently Microsoft Gaming's chief content officer. He has overseen Xbox first-party game strategy across all the Xbox studios, or maybe just Xbox, Bethesda, Activision, Blizzard, and King. I'm a little uncertain on exactly how much his scope is for all their studios, but he has spent decades in the games industry in a leadership role around Microsoft. I think Midway or Xbox Game Studios. I'm not his biggest fan. I'm not keeping track of all his career moves. Bottom line, he's currently part of Microsoft's gaming arm as the chief content officer. He's been around a long time, and he had already made a post on The Elder Scrolls 6 saying, quote, looks amazing, end quote. And he also mentioned, quote, coming along well, end quote. So this isn't the first time there's been a corporate message praising an unreleased game from this company by this studio for this game that really tells us very little about final quality. I also think there's a little bit of marketing genius here because the tweet could have just said The Elder Scrolls 6, but instead there's a number of asterisks spaced out after The Elder Scrolls 6. I think it's just going to force people to start theorizing, counting characters, and trying to figure out what might be the name of this entry. I don't care. I don't care even a little bit. Whenever it is what it is, then that's what it is. But it could have been blank. It could have been a space and moved on with the sentence. It was deliberate. There was something here that wanted to see if we could create just a little bit of buzz, and I think it worked. I think one of the bigger items on my list here is that Xbox has an opportunity here to share a positive message where the Asha came in and announced, hey, there's going to be a restructuring and we're going to close a number of positions. That means that people who are employed will not be employed by those studios anymore. And I think that in general, people assume that's bad news. And we're not going to get into the weeds on whether it's good or bad. But this is a definitively positive story to come from leadership at the company about the biggest future RPG they're releasing. And I think it's extremely useful to have a positive story come out from this group at this time for them. Good or bad, right or wrong, we're not going to debate that. I don't care about that. The facts are they've had some news that I think the general population as a whole said, hey, that's not great. And now they're sharing some good news and we can all say, hey, that's great. The thing that draws me in, the thing that made me go, I think maybe I'll talk about this, is I'm going to say this verbatim, quote, The story is even greater, end quote. This is really hard to take seriously because we don't know how much she actually saw. Yes, I think you can judge graphical scale in a little 5-minute showcase. You get it. But can you really judge the quality of a 50, maybe 100-hour main story RPG from an executive presentation? I just don't think that's the case. Maybe I'm wrong. There's clearly information I do not have here, but this very broad language, quote, the story is even greater, end quote, is very hard to take seriously. Let's also be a little bit, keep our fair bear hats on here. Listen, you think the internal executives at Bethesda aren't going to give a curated version to the boss higher up the chain in their corporation, right? Bethesda isn't going to greet the new Xbox CEO and say, here's the broken quest line we haven't fixed. Here's the part where performance collapses. You know, I think it's pretty reasonable to assume they showed them their best possible work. And so, of course, someone walked away and went, hey, it's good. Well, of course it's good. The story's even greater. It's great. Yeah, you know, of course they showed her the best. And let's be clear here. I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. If anything, you want to say, here's the bar we're aiming for, and here's the places we've hit that bar. We're doing our best work. It takes more time. I think that's okay that they showed a build that is looking good because that's what your final product should look all the way through. But we also don't really know what a live playthrough here means. It could mean someone sat in front of her and played for 30 minutes. We don't know the duration. We don't know how complete the build is. We don't know the environment. There's just kind of a lot of questions with something so short and broad. And also, there's no criticism in this statement. It's all promotional language, not analysis. Again, scale and grandeur are incredible. The story's even greater. That is promotional language, not analysis. It's not a critical assessment. It's just a promotional statement. Quote, the scale and grandeur are incredible. The story is even greater, end quote. It's promotional language. We should not give any real weight to promotional language. Not because it's dishonest, but it's not there to critique and help you make an assessment. It's there to promote and help you to buy. Ignoring everything I've just said, this statement came from the literal chief executive officer of the company selling it. The CEO showed up and said, it's great. Hey, calm down. This person is as far from an independent source as possible. There is no incentive for this individual to want this game to not succeed. To say that again, this game succeeding is directly in her interest. Of course, she's trying to sell us the product. It's kind of part of her job, right? She's the CEO. If this product doesn't sell, nobody keeps their jobs. So, the reasons I think we should be skeptical, just to be clear here. I think the game still has plenty of time on its development timeline to change substantially. A huge world isn't automatically a good world. The tweet really feels engineered to generate speculation and buzz, and it's also coming at a time when maybe the company wants to get a positive message out there to draw more headlines than the negative ones. Obviously, an internal executive demonstration is probably curated here. We don't really know what live playthrough means. We don't really know what stories even greater means. And there's no criticism here. It's promotional language from someone whose part of their role is to make sure that this product succeeds. So I don't think we should really take anything from this. There's just not enough substance here and too much missing information. Ignoring everything, I do want to end on this note. I think there's probably a real and potentially encouraging signal buried underneath all the conflict and debate around this message. I walk away from this saying to myself, it seems like The Elder Scrolls 6 has a substantial playable game internally. That's not just a collection of prototypes or unfinished systems. I think we have someone who's describing live playthrough here so we can start to put together that Bethesda has enough of the world, the quests, the characters, the story function that senior leadership can sit down and experience something that at least resembles a game and walk away brave enough, confident enough to publicly talk about it. I think the encouraging part isn't that the Xbox CEO says the game is incredible. Of course she says that. The encouraging part to me here is that it seems to be there's enough of an actual game after 8 years for executives to sit down and play it, and apparently see enough of the world and story to come away talking about it.